Hello. Oh, y'all, I'm kind of hot today. I feel like I'm having a hot flash right now. Woo. Anyway, welcome to Worthy Wednesday. I just discovered today that during Worthy Wednesday for October, hey, Stacy, we are going to meet on the 7th, the 14th, the 21st, and then the 28th. So I thought that was pretty cool. We'll meet exactly 7 days apart according to the date. So I'm excited about that. I am also excited to report that there are 399 worthy women in our group. So welcome to each of you. For those of you I have seen and know, I love y'all. Thank y'all for being here. And for all of those worthy women that were invited by the members of the group, we welcome you. We love you. We are so thankful that you are a part of our community. I can't seriously get out of here. 399 worthy women. That's amazing. So thank you for being here on our journey. And during the month of October, I thought I was going to be cute and try to find something fancy to say like surprise September, but it did not work out that way. And then I thought I would just talk about something that is absolutely important to me and something that I have dealt with and had to work through and get free from, and that was fear. So last week we started about fear. And this week I want to continue even more to talk about fear. It's a really tough subject. I think there are things that happened in our lives that cause us to be fearful. We have moments of fear. We have seasons or feelings of fear, but I think it becomes something else when fear really becomes a battle. And for some people, myself included, there was a time in my life where fear was a daily battle. And I can't really say now what caused that or what triggered it, but I experienced it for a time in my life where I just was kind of like, what is going on? Like, I don't know why I feel fearful about, just literally worthy women about everything. And so last week we talked about fearing less because we have to get rid of it. We have to know what it is. And fear has two purposes. Number one, to distract. Number two, to destroy. So your assignment for fear last week was to acknowledge, meaning where have you given it the rights and the privilege to occupy in your life. So you had to acknowledge fear. And then this week, I wanted to talk about FearFILL. Now, y'all might think that that's a typo or I'm messing up when I'm saying it, because you'd be like, you mean fearful? And I'm like, no, I mean FearFILL. So let me just give you a little, I couldn't really figure out how I wanted to present this. I felt like I wanted to tell a story. I felt like I wanted to give you all this information. And then I really just believe the Lord gave me an illustration that pretty much solidified what I feel and what I felt during that time, and even what I felt in certain situations in my life about being fear and fill. So last week we discovered that fear is an unpleasant, often strong emotion caused by the anticipation or the awareness of danger. But there's a word that people use quite often, and sometimes we use words interchangeably. So for me, it's really important to distinguish one from the other, because I never want us to put two words together and say, oh, that means the same thing, when really it doesn't mean the same thing. So I looked up the word afraid, because if you have children or you've been around children or even adults, sometimes people won't say that they're fearful. They'll say, I was afraid. And I wanted to know if afraid is the same thing as fear. Is it in the family of fear? Or are they just polar opposites? So, of course, I went to the dictionary first, which then led me to being fear and fill tonight, which was unbelievable. So, afraid means filled with fear How about that? Or apprehension. It also means to be filled with concern or regret over an unwanted situation. So when I say I am afraid, I am saying that I am filled with fear. Y'all, well, my first thought was, if fear is an unpleasant or often strong emotion, how can, if I say I'm afraid, how can I now be filled with that? Because in my brain, I really wanted to figure out how we use words and try to justify that our behavior or our belief system is not directly tied to the words that we say. Because we know in reality, what we say is exactly what we mean. Now, we might tell people, well, that's what you interpreted or that's how you read into it. But we know what we mean when we say certain words. So if you have ever said, I'm afraid of dogs, or I'm afraid of tarantulas, or I'm afraid of snakes, you have literally said that I am filled with fear about this particular thing. Like my entire being now encompasses fear, a strong emotion caused by the anticipation or the awareness of danger. So, for example, if you are afraid of snakes, your body is expressing through many facets: sweat, fear. I'm sorry, not fear, sweat. It could be shaking. It could be stress. It could be yelling. It could be screaming. Your body is now filled with all of the elements of fear because of a snake that is at your front door. Well, you know, I mean, we live in the desert, so snakes is pretty natural. In New Mexico, we didn't have a lot of snakes. We had these big bugs called vinegaroons. Okay, if you've never seen one, look it up. It's pretty disturbing. And I remember one time, my sister, my mom, and I were at home, and a vinegaroon got in the house, and it probably took us 2 hours to kill that thing. We literally stood in the hallway, sweating bullets, trying to kill, my God, this vinegaroon. And what they do is they squirt this like vinegar spray. It's really gross, number one, and it's really stinky. But they're like this big, and I'm not kidding you. So you can't really just like step on it with a tennis shoe. So praise God, at that time, my dad was in the military. So of course, I don't know how I always end up being the one killing the bugs. I digress. So I had to go put on my dad's combat boots so I could like step on it and just kind of hold my leg there and all my weight. However, that night we were afraid of vinegaroons. We were all three of us filled with fear and apprehension. We were also filled with concern and regret because we did not want the situation of the vinegaroon in the hallway. That's the end of that story. I digress. But I had to tell y'all because I want you to understand how easy it is to possess fear in any situation. You can go from thinking about something and not really having a concern about it to immediately being filled with so much angst, so much worry, so much concern, so much just everything that causes you to overflow in that situation with fear. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about, and then I said I would talk about being fear-filled, I was like, first I need to know what fill means. Because if I'm filled with fear when I'm afraid, then I need to know what am I filled with. So I need to know what fill means. So this is what fill means. Of course, it's a verb because it's action. And it says to put into as much as can be held or conveniently contained. So, for example, when you go to Chick-fil-A, they fill up your cup to the capacity of the size that you order, small, medium, or large, with the drink that you order. It also means to occupy the whole of. So when you get the cup, the soda or lemonade or sweet tea occupies the entire amount. Y'all understand what I'm saying? So the cup has a certain capacity, 21 ounces, 32 ounces, 44 ounces, and they fill it up with the beverage of your selection. So it occupies the whole, the entirety of the cup. Fill also means to stop up. So for example, when you are filling the bathtub, you put the stopper in the tub when you turn on the water, and then it stops the water from exiting. So that's what fill means. Now, fear can be many things, and words like afraid and fear can be used interchangeably because one really does define the other. And so I thought to myself during my meditation for this week, I've said a lot of times that I'm afraid of something. Like, I like to go on roller coasters, but I'm really afraid of them. Seriously. I will do it though. I will have my eyes closed. I will be holding the bar so tightly. I will literally be praying the entire time, but I'll go on it with you. But I am literally afraid of roller coasters. But I've never said I am fearful of roller coasters. But today I recognized that I actually am saying I am fearful of roller coasters because I just said that I'm afraid of them. And I wonder, worthy women, have any of you ever said to yourself, well, I'm afraid of being alone, but I don't have any fear if I am alone. I'm afraid of getting divorced, but I won't fear if I have to get divorced. I'm afraid of not having any money in my bank account, but I don't fear not having any money. I'm afraid of getting fired from my job, but I'm not fearful of losing my job. Have you ever said that you were just afraid of something, therefore trying to convince yourself that you really don't have fear about it? All the while, unbeknownst to you, you were really just saying, I am full. I am filled to the occupancy that my entire body can hold of fear concerning this thing in my life. I had a girlfriend that experienced a miscarriage. And she said, I'm not afraid to have a miscarriage, but I am fearful not to carry the baby to term. And being a mother, and I've never experienced that, I didn't really know how to relate to her. But today I thought about what she was saying, that what happens when we're in a situation that we cannot explain. We almost think that saying, I'm afraid of the situation, but not the outcome of the situation. And then if we say, but we fear the outcome, that we're saying two different things, and we're giving ourselves a happy medium, and that we're not going to experience one or the other. But the truth is, whether you're afraid of something or you fear something, the outcome is the same, because I have a strong emotion. And the difference is that when I'm afraid, I am filled with fear, and I now have an extreme anticipation and awareness of danger. So I thought to myself, when she told me that I was like, oh man, like, I totally understand. I get that. Like, I would be afraid of not being able to carry the baby to term and all that stuff. But I think I would be more fearful if the baby didn't make it. But the reality is, those two things were the same for her. She said something different, hoping that it would change how she really felt on the inside. But y'all, it didn't change anything. Because if you are filled, it means to put into as much can be held or contained, to stop up or to occupy the whole of. So she, although she was physically filled with carrying the baby, she was more filled with fear. Okay. Worthy women, I want to explain something to you tonight. When I say I am filled with fear, I am saying that what is alive in me is something that is causing me to anticipate or be aware of danger. Have you ever said to someone, well, they are filled with hate. They are filled with anger. They are filled with racism. They are filled with prejudice. What you're saying is that they don't have the capacity to hold anything else. That their entire being is filled from the crown of their head to the sole of their feet with hate or prejudice or anger or racism. Have you ever been filled to capacity with something? I feel like this is so important that we make a distinction between fear and afraid and recognize that one feeds the other. So I'm not getting away from the root, which is fear. And that's what I want us to destroy, is fear. So y'all, here's what I want to know tonight. And then I'm going to show you an illustration that's going to bring it all the way home. I want to know, what are you filled with today? What occupies the whole of you? And if I could squeeze you right now, what would come out? What? Because see, what fills you is what comes out. There's nothing that you can say or do, because when the pressure is applied, and that pressure is just life. Now, here's what I want you to remember. Life is not always intense. Sometimes it's really happy, it's really joyful, it's really celebratory. You get struck with surprise and you're living it. And then sometimes life can be a little bit more intense, where it's a little bit more tough, and there's some circumstances that are a little bit more difficult. But even in those circumstances that are difficult or happy, I still want to know what fills you. Because see, how we live in a circumstance that's difficult and what comes out when we're squeezed by that life circumstance will tell you what you are filled with. Now, I'm just going to be honest. For me, there have been things and times in my life and situations and circumstances that when I was squeezed by life, fear is what came out. Sometimes anger, sometimes rejection, sometimes disappointment, sometimes hurt, sometimes joy, sometimes excitement, sometimes thankfulness, sometimes gratefulness. But what I'm telling you, worthy women, is that whatever is filled, whether that's fear or faith, doubt, belief, trust, whatever you fill yourself with is what is going to come out. I couldn't really decide how I was going to make this lesson of FearFILL appropriate, because I felt like, oh, Carrie, like you're really saying that people can't be filled with things, or they shouldn't be filled with things. And I thought, that's exactly what I'm saying. We need to be so aware of what we are filling ourselves with. Now, let me tell y'all something, because we're women and sometimes we don't think about this. Sometimes we can fill our lives with gossip. I mean, duh. Sometimes just innocent and idle conversation, it fills us with anger and animosity and resentment and bitterness. All of these elements that don't have anything to do with us, but because of what we're filling ourselves with, we have now become fully occupied, fully stopped up with those elements from that other Wait a minute. Y'all, did you know who is in your life can fill you with the things that are in them? Wait a minute. Y'all, this is why you have to recognize. That's why teaching is so important. The brain establishes a connection with the person that is teaching you something, and what they are saying to you fills you. That's why kids can learn. That's why kids learn how to sing. That's why they learn a different language. That's why they learn history. That's why they learn science, because the teacher is filling them with information. He or she is filling them unto the point of occupancy. That means I am going to use all of you, all of your learning power, every ounce of your mind, all of your faculties, touch, taste, hear, smell, in order to teach you something. But that same teacher could teach a child how to hate. The same teacher could teach a child how to be ugly, how to yell and scream, and how not to be friendly, because that relationship fills me, and then I turn around and I fill you with what you've given. You know, it's funny, they say when you have children, children are usually a direct reflection of you. Like, they might not look like you, but they might act like you. And I have a daughter, and I sometimes think she looks like me. I truly believe she acts like me. And I recognize sometimes when we are talking, especially now that she's at college, that sometimes I just want to say, little girl, who are you talking to right now? Listen, I am the adult. You don't know anything. But what I recognize today, that I had a choice in how I filled her. I could have filled her with fear and self-doubt and disappointment and rejection and no lack of confidence. But I didn't. I filled her with hope and faith and belief and trust in God and reading your Bible and praying. I filled her with the things that had been filled into me. And I thought to myself, how important it is to recognize that when you are interacting with someone else, you have the ability and the power to fill them with faith or fear. Listen, y'all. I thought to myself, those two words put together would almost be an oxymoron, except I understand that filling something means I take it all the way to its capacity. So I said to the Lord, I really don't know how to make this plain. I really feel like this is just for me and the things that I'm navigating at this moment, where I feel like I'm in a battle to decide. Half of me wants to fight in faith. Half of me is filled with fear. And then during the day, sometimes that flip-flops. More of me is filled with faith, and then a little bit of me is filled with fear. And then sometimes I'm filled with anxiety, and then the other times I'm filled with faith. And I'm constantly warring, trying to decide, who am I going to believe? Who am I going to be? What am I going to be committed to? What's going to come out of me when this situation in my life starts squeezing me? Because there comes a time in your life, in any circumstance, in any situation, worthy women, you have to answer. You have to stand flat-footed and confront that thing. And I really couldn't decide tonight whether or not I even wanted to say out loud that I am struggling, trying to figure out, do I believe enough to be filled to capacity with faith and hope and trust and strength and stretching and seeing and not being triggered by things that are happening in my life? Or do I have the capacity to be filled with fear because I'm only saying that I'm afraid, but in reality I'm saying I'm filled with fear because I don't know how something like this is going to work out. I don't know when it's going to work out. I just wish I knew the answer. And perhaps that's not anything that you have had to deal with. But in the words of my mother, who is very wise, and she's always told me, Carrie, just keep living. So I want to know, how do I get rid of the fear that I filled myself with? And I want to show you what filling yourself with fear actually looks like. So this is you right here, this fancy cup. And this is your life. And when you are in your life, there comes a time that you start filling yourself with things. Some of that is education. And then you might do something else, and you might become a doctor. You might get married, and that fills you up. You might make a decision that you really want to serve the Lord, and you find a great church and you do that. You might decide that you want to travel the world, and you get to do that. And then you might decide that you want to have children, and you do that, and that works out too. And I mean, children fill you up for real, because they take all your time, energy, effort, and money. And then you decide that you're fulfilled in your relationships, and that fills you up. Now look at your life. Doesn't it look beautiful? It's full. You are full to capacity. I could barely get a little bit more water in there before my life, or who I am, would begin to overflow. But I was asking myself, what really happens when other things start making their way into my life and I'm already at full capacity, but something hits me and I wasn't ready? So let's just say that thing was a medical diagnosis, and then a treatment that takes forever. Then we lose our house. I lost my job. My kids ran away from home. I broke up with my spouse. My parents die. I'm in a terrible car accident. Worthy women, I hope you can see what's happening here. See what's in you is rising to the top and coming out, because what's now coming in wants to occupy you. It doesn't care about all the good things that were once in your life. That's all that stuff down here. Now the things that are fear-filled are entering. So I thought about that, and I said, how many times have we been filled with faith and hope and anticipation and grace and mercy, and then life happens? And all of the things that were keeping us alive and keeping us moving forward were eventually spilled out. And the only thing left in our life were those things that we were afraid of. The only thing that I have to find any reference point to were the things that broke me, the things that devastated me, the things that changed my belief in God. It changed my belief in myself. It changed my belief in the good of the world. I only remember the things that hurt me. And because I can only remember those things are the only thing that fill me now. Because see what happens when all the bad things start pouring into my life, and sometimes it's not bad, it's just life, because that's what happens. But as it's pouring into my life, I can't even grab a hold to my faith or to my trust or to my belief or to a good relationship or to money or to a good job. All I have is nothing. And instead of me working to refill my life with the things that I once had, I decide that I'd rather just be afraid, full of fear, because that's what happens when what's on the outside infiltrates the inside. So I couldn't figure out how do I bring that home, because low-key I felt slightly depressed after thinking about this illustration and then actually doing it for myself to see it. I said to myself, how in the world do I get rid of this? How do I make sure that my life, my thoughts, my words, my actions are filled with faith and life-giving words that change the absolute course and direction of my... I said, how in the world do I get rid of the things that have literally flushed out what I knew and have filled me with the opposite? So last week we said that the first step was to acknowledge fear, meaning recognize where you have given it the rights and the privilege in your life and why you need to destroy it and yank those rights back and say, absolutely not. You have no place in my life. You cannot have a place in my life. But step two, after you acknowledge where you have it, step two is to replace it. See, the beauty of the illustration, Worthy Women, is eventually I am replacing all of the water that was on the inside with new water. And that's exactly what you have to do in your life. You have to replace all fear, all fear. I don't care where it comes from. If it's from scary movies, stop watching them. There you go. Eliminate it. You have to replace things that fill you with fear. You have to replace them. And then I thought, Kari, sometimes saying something is easier than actually executing it. That's what I've learned being a teacher. That's what I've learned being a mother. When I say do it because I said, that's not always the best response. And so I asked myself, how do I replace fear in my life? So I made an acronym because y'all know I like words and it's fun. So the H in how is here. What do I hear? Lady, worthy women, listen to me. You cannot hear negativity, doubt, disbelief, frustration, anger, and think that you won't speak doubt, unbelief, frustration, fear, and anger. You have to watch what you hear. You cannot become, nor should you ever be, a dumping ground for anybody. And let me just keep it 100. I'm talking about yourself first, because self-talk is the biggest place where fear begins. What I say to myself, what I say about myself, I am always with myself. So I am always hearing what I say. I can turn people off. I can ignore them, but I am with me all the time. So when I tell you, how do you replace fear? Number one, you hear it. So you have to say to myself, I will no longer fill myself with fear, anxiety, worry, distrust, unbelief, hesitation. I will now speak words of life, encouragement, belief, satisfaction to myself. If you find yourself in the mirror saying, my God, I look ugly, that's fear. You need to say, I'm sorry, me. Listen, girl, it's 5:15. Nobody looks that good at 5:15, but you are beautiful because you are fearfully and wonderfully made. And as Karee would tell you every day, you are worthy because you are. That's how you hear words that will begin to fill you. So when people squeeze you, you can encourage somebody else. So the first thing is you hear. The second thing is options. Now, I know when we go to restaurants, we love options because we might not want a hamburger, except for me, because I do. But we want options. We want to be able to choose what we like. So it's funny to me that the definition of option is the act of choosing. So worthy women, how do you replace fear? You choose it. You start choosing it every single day. And then the last thing, the W, is write. Now, I'm pretty big on writing because I'm pretty big on talking. I don't really know how that works out, but it just works out for me. And you might not be a writer, you might be a journaler, you might be a doodler, you might be I'm gonna send a message to myself, you might be able to create something and you watch it over and over. But I am telling you, it is important to write. The brain makes a connection to things that you see and that you hear, and it makes a deeper connection when you write those things. So if you have to write statements about why you are not going to be afraid, why you are not going to be filled with fear in any circumstance of your life, I encourage you to do that. Now, for me, I do it all the time. I will write myself a note in a heartbeat. Dear Karee, you can make it. And I just go on about my day. If I have to send myself a text message, it's going to be okay. And then I get the message. I'm like, oh, I got a text. Duh, it's from me. You're going to make it. It's going to be okay. You have to provide yourself a way to remind you what is important. How do I fill myself with words and deeds and actions and beliefs that will propel me forward in my worthiness? That I recognize this particular situation, it's not my favorite. Going through a pandemic, totally not my favorite. Not knowing if I'm going to have a job, totally not my favorite. But I can hear things that make me thankful. Thank God we have a home. Thank God we can go get food. Thank God we have a car. Thank God we have gas in that car. I can be thankful that my children are still alive, that my children are healthy. I am thankful my parents are healthy. You can begin to hear things by saying them and then opt to choose. You have to choose words of life. And I think the hardest thing for me, because I'm not going to say it's for you, but I'm going to say the hardest thing for me is choosing to repeat those words over and over and over. And I really couldn't figure out what would be a good example of that as I was studying. And then I remembered the ABC song. Everybody learned the ABC song. Everywhere. All over the world. Even children that their first language is not English, they learned the ABC song. And I thought to myself, first of all, who made that up? Because I wish I did, I'd be rich. Second thing I thought is that why is music so important? Why is it that I can hum a tune and recall a song? I might not be able to recall the words immediately, but if I hum it long enough, it's going to pull it all the way back up from long term and bring it to short term so I can remember where I was when I first heard that song and think about all of the good things that are associated with that or all of the not so good things that are associated with that. And then I said, but why does that work when it comes to being fear-filled? What does the ABCs, for real, have to do with that? And then I remembered this. It wasn't really about the song. It was about the letters of the alphabet. And if you can remember that the reason why you are replacing fear is because you no longer want to be bound by it, it'll be easier for you to do it every day. How many times have we sang the ABC songs and we said LNNOP before we realized that all of those were separate letters? That's the same thing with fear. When you decide every single day that I am going to replace one, worthy women, if you replace one fear-filled thought, you are changing what is filling you. Look, listen, it might take you a month, 2 weeks, a year to replace some of the deep-seated fear that we have allowed to fill our lives for years. But the beauty of this is that you can replace it and you can be filled with hope and joy and expectation. So, on the 14th day of October, my challenge to you, worthy women, tonight and for the rest of this week until we meet again next Worthy Wednesday, is to start replacing fear-filled words in your life. I know it seems a little difficult and seems a little crazy, and sometimes it almost seems like fear overruns us and there's no way that we're paralyzed to say anything differently. But just remember the ABC song. The more you sing it, the more you know it, and the easier it becomes to do it. I love y'all so much, worthy women. This is Fear-Free October. I'll see you again.